can never do it. It's like, try harder, I guess. There we go.
Hey,
Okay,
we're
we are live. And welcome, people. We are talking about emergency preparedness today and how it looks different across the wealth spectrum for people without a lot of money and for people in the middle and for people who have more money than I don't know what that is. More money than they should, more money than they know what to do with, more money than, they could ever be earned in a lifetime, for the billionaires. Among us and out there. So anyway, I'm Allison Tate and I write Inheriting Inequality and I'm with Michelle.
I'm Michelle Teheux, and I write Untrickled, and I have gone to full summer mode. I'm prepared for summer. That's what I'm prepared for.
I love it. So we were thinking we would just start off with basic financial advice, kind of what the advice is out there. And I think it's pretty clear that most people don't have the amount that is, typically recommended. So the standard rule, just, I think everyone's probably seen this somewhere if they've Googled anything or they've gotten any financial advice or they've seen any of the tons of financial advice material that's out there online. The standard rule is about 3 to 6 months of essential expenses that are kept in cash. If you look if you go to Fidelity or Vanguard or even like Nerd Wallet, this is what they'll tell you. And it's the first piece of advice when you go to like a financial planner, they say have 3 to 6 months of essential expenses kept in
And
cash.
you know what? That is exactly like a dietitian saying eat 14 servings a day of green leafy vegetables. Yeah. Uh,
So what you're telling me is no one eats that much kale and no one has that saved.
I mean, if you do, that is great. What I think a lot of people find is that at first they can save nothing because it's taking all of their taking all of their savings just to live, and
Right.
then maybe start doing a little bit better. You do start, being able to save up a little bit for the future. But
Yeah.
I wanted to start at the wrong.
3 to 6 months. How many people that you know do you think have 3 to 6 months saved in cash, not just like in a retirement account, right?
I mean, I think very, very few, and probably the older you get, the more they have.
Yeah.
Well, it's potentially, but yeah, when I was young, my emergency savings was having friends who could step in if I had an emergency. So let's start from the very bottom level. The very
Yeah.
bottom level. You don't have any money. It is taking all your money to pay the rent, pay for the groceries, pay for gas for your car, whatever things.
Yeah.
Uh, at that point, while you're like that, sure, do the things you can do to try to improve your financial position, but also build your community because that is, I don't care who
Right.
you are, you need a community.
Yeah.
It's a person that will spot you $5 for gas in an emergency, watch your kids,
Right.
it, um, on up to, letting you crash on their couch if the worst happens. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone's community. Sometimes, if your car is broken down, maybe you need a ride to work. A
Yeah.
community is the number one thing I think that people need over and above money. And in the case of a non-financial emergency, you need community even more because, like the lady next door to me lives alone and is a little bit older. So immediately I thought I better go make sure, because we just had a 14-hour power outage. I thought I better go make sure she's got candles or something. And she did. She was fine. But I would hate to think about someone being all alone. And,
Mhm.
I know she's not one to do a lot of cooking for herself. She does a lot of frozen and microwavable foods, which is fine, but she can't do that during a power outage.
Right,
Just
which is fine until you have no power,
just
right?
wanted to make sure she was okay. She was okay, so I
Yeah.
checked. And everybody needs a community because whether it's financial or weather related or
Mhm.
natural disaster,
Yeah.
you should try to go it alone, and hopefully you've got a few bucks to get through it. And
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting point, right? Because that transcends all of the different levels of wealth and income is actually having a community and having people you can count on. And obviously, you could have staff, right? Like the more money you have, but it's not clear that you can count on staff in the same way that you can count on your neighbor, right? Because
big enough,
not necessarily being in community, right? It's not the same thing.
I think in a really really bad disaster of some kind, if you're rich and you have a staff, you better hope that staff likes you and
Yeah.
or just the
Well, that's what I
paycheck.
was just thinking. I was like, I was gonna save this because I know we're gonna sort of talk about apocalypse planning at the end or whenever, but because it's a great topic. I mean, just because it's so science fiction like, but also not. So I have a friend who writes about like apocalypse planning for really rich people and billionaires, and she was actually invited to go to a conference and talk to basically billionaires about emergency preparedness and what they should be doing. And one of the questions that came up a couple times was basically, will my staff like stay with me in the apocalypse? Like how do I make sure that they don't actually like stage a coup and take over all my stuff in the apocalypse? It's very like it's very French Revolution. It's very this was actually it's actually funny. Martha Washington, I always come back to Martha Washington. She was worried about this because George Washington left her a number of enslaved people in his will. And she was afraid without his presence that they would actually leave or, engage in violence against her or something like that, which, you know, didn't happen, but she was afraid of it for a long time. She would write letters to Abigail Adams, like, she was scared for her life. So it's interesting, right? So it's a different that's obviously not being in community, when you have staff or you have people who are, in service to you, and so it's a whole different thing. So it's actually interesting, like what you're saying, people with an actual community who have people who will help them if their car dies or who will go over and check on them if there's no power, look a lot different and maybe actually like well situated compared to Mark Zuckerberg on his Hawaii half of Hawaii and his underground bunker. That's the largest one, I think, now in the world.
Yeah, there was, I can't remember his name, I wish I could remember off the top of my head, but, a writer who, was invited actually to go to, I wanna say it was Davos, and the billionaires wanted to know, "What do we do just in
Yeah,
case?"
yeah.
And, because they were afraid that, like, these are, like, armed, tough guys that they employ, and,
Mhm.
like, what would stop them from shooting me and taking over my bunker? And his answer was
Right,
basically, "Are you nice to them?" And that
right, right,
concept that not apparently considered is that
right.
you
He's
might
like, "Well, there's a pretty easy answer to this, right? Like, pay them well, treat them well, treat them like
invite
people." Right,
know
that's
they're welcome if the worst
yeah.
would happen. And, we don't like to think that that sort of thing can happen, but, we've seen some things.
Mhm.
COVID was a time that,
Yeah,
you didn't have, food in your house,
yeah.
didn't have, your medication that you needed or things
Mm,
like that. I mean, there were probably a lot of people that suffered because they hadn't made any preparations at all.
right.
I was stocked up before COVID. I always keep a decent pantry, but I
Mhm.
remember very early New York Times article about this mysterious, illness, and I thought, "Crap, I'm going to the store."
In the
And so I
store, yeah. Well, you and a
I
lot
went
of other people, right, who took all the toilet paper.
I
Um,
always have toilet paper. I'm a Costco member.
there you go. So I
Oh,
wanted to come back to
funny.
the financial advice though. So so the idea that you're gonna have I think for a lot of people it's outlandish, that you would keep 6 months worth of salary in cash in a high you're supposed to have it in a high yield savings account. I feel like I don't know many people who do that even if they could, they keep it, like, in an investment account, and then it would take it out. So I don't know, but it is a piece of advice, but then I think even the financial advisors know that that's not really feasible for most people, so they do say, like, "Start small," right? Just put aside $10 a week or $100 a month or something like that. So, what do you think about, like, when it becomes feasible for people to actually, like, put money aside in savings?
In my experience, you can't do that until you've got your basic needs and 10% or whatever available because
Yeah.
for an awful lot of years that I didn't have anything extra. Every penny I made went to basic needs, and that's not all that unusual. And,
Yeah.
the time came when yeah, I was, completely aware, this wasn't an ignorance thing, this was like, I really wish I had more in savings, but I just couldn't do it. And when I could do it, I did do it, and I do have a little bit of a buffer now. I
Mhm.
math to figure out what percent or whatever, but,
Yeah.
um, in my case, I keep it flexible. Like, I make car payments to myself because I'm going to have to replace my car in the
Mhm.
future, so I've been anticipating that. and so I've got, like, a chunk of money that I intend for a car, but if
Yeah.
a tornado hit my house, I would switch that money from, car funds to,
Right.
trust fund or whatever.
Yeah. So you do have like it's an emergency slash like I don't want to call it a slush fund because that's not the right word, but a fund that could be used for any number of things that gives you
Yeah,
a buffer zone, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and I've also learned to keep a little bit of actual cash money on hand. I'll
Yeah.
give you times that has mattered, and one is this is some years ago, it was pre-COVID, so it was like a little preview to, like, panicking hordes of people. We were
Yeah.
driving to, visit my daughter who lives in a Chicago suburb, so it was, like, 3 hours from where I live, so it's a long car ride, and, we had kind of, like, pushed the gas a little bit, like, it's getting low, and there's this long, area where you're driving from Central Illinois to Chicago. At first, you've got plenty of gas stations where
Yeah.
you got plenty, but then
Yeah.
there's this, like, cornfields, and that's always when I start to run low on gas. God,
Uh-huh.
I don't know why I haven't learned, but
Yeah.
anyway, my husband was like, "Okay, we're gonna take the next exit and get some gas." Like, "Okay," because he was driving. So we stopped, and we were, like, on fumes. Again, this is not a this is a cautionary tale, don't do this.
Yeah.
Fumes, we're gonna get gas, and their credit card machine was out. I always put all
Yeah.
gas Discover card. I like the cashback deal I get.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
The people in that gas station were like think of any apocalyptic movie you've ever seen. "Ah! Ah, the world is ending, oh my god." And, I didn't usually carry cash, but I'm like, "I've gotta have something tucked away," and yes, I had a $20 bill tucked away in the back of my wallet, and,
Yeah.
like, thank God I got that 20 bucks. So other people were, like, just, like, in pure panic mode. I
Yeah.
got worth the gas, which was more than enough to get me wherever I needed to go,
Yeah.
and at that point, I realized always keep 20 bucks or so in your
Yeah.
always because stuff like this sometimes happens, and
Yeah.
people are prepared for it if you don't just stick 20 bucks or something back.
Actually good. It's really I mean, it's good advice for so many reasons, and I this is a whole nother topic, but I was thinking about it a little while ago. I always think about it when I travel because it's the only time I ever use cash for tipping people. And I just think about like how that whole entire tipping economy has changed now that there's people don't have cash anymore. And a lot of places like, when you valet, you can Venmo or you can do Venmo a lot of places, but just like to leave money for the housekeeping or whatever. Like just to have $20, but $20 especially comes in handy if you are in the middle of a cornfield and you're trying to get gas, right? Like that's incredible.
Well,
Um
and also not just the $20 bill, but it's handy to have a few ones because
yeah,
sometimes little things come up and, you don't not necessarily need 20, but there've been a number of situations where you just wanna maybe you wanna stick a dollar in a Salvation Army kettle or something like
that
that.
too, I was thinking about that, right? People don't have, like, a dollar anymore if you go I mean, that type of, like, micro fundraising or, even just giving money to people, on the street. Like,
I have a
people don't have
yeah,
money anymore to do that.
yeah, yeah. So,
Like,
yeah,
going cashless does something different to the way that we function.
yes. And then, speaking of community, so someone we know came by our house. This was actually during the power outage, so that was really kind of a everything hitting at once type of thing. Uh,
Uh-huh.
person came to our door. This person was completely broken. The person's life had blown up in a dramatic and frightening way. This was a breakup was just one part of it. There's far, far more that I won't go into. And this person basically had no money and no place to stay for the night, and it's a power outage,
Mm,
and everything that could go wrong had gone wrong. And
mhm,
at that point in time, I was really glad that I was able to go to my little fireproof safe and take
mhm.
out money to give that person enough for a cheap hotel and a little bit. I packed up some food. The only all the food in my house has to be cooked. I'm a cook
Yeah.
from scratch. So I gave this person apples and oranges
I
and
mean, nothing wrong with an apple, right?
apple nuts, and I had some like protein bars that I keep for like a little
Yeah.
emergency.
That's
And
my
this was
apocalypse planning is I have a lot of protein bars. That's like the
it
beginning and
got
end of my day. I have goldfish and protein bars, so if the apocalypse does come, I will be eating pizza goldfish and, chocolate chip cookie dough protein bars, and I won't last very long.
um, that's our number 1 tip, you guys. Pizza
Yeah, right.
is
Pizza goldfish. Ah,
I keep I like to keep these protein bars.
not sponsored content. This is actually just me loving pizza goldfish.
I always keep a protein bar in my purse at all times because
Yeah.
sometimes you're out and about and you get really hungry. And what is your choice? You don't have time or inclination, or maybe you don't want to spend the money. And in my case, probably all three, to go to a restaurant. And I don't want to do fast food. I avoid fast food to every extent possible. And not that a protein bar is some fantastic healthy choice, but sometimes it gets you through the next few hours till you.
Gets it done, yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I always have a few protein bars
Yeah.
on hand, and, having enough money to stay at a hotel for a couple of nights and,
Yep.
I
I mean,
don't
that's
know.
the big thing. I mean, this obviously is a, sort of it's separate and equally like really important topic. But yeah, I mean, when you have people who are in distress like that, when they're trying to leave a home, right, leave a difficult situation, potentially leaving, right, like domestic violence, like the ability to access money quickly is really, really, really important.
I remember in a novel, a woman who was actually quite wealthy had a need to suddenly leave her entire life behind like that, and she
Hmm.
in complete desperation, stealing someone's McDonald's, she just grabbed the bag and ran off, and she
Yeah,
got it, but she
right,
couldn't know what else to do because she was used to being completely well taken care of, and then all of a sudden,
right,
it's like on the street with nothing,
right.
and
Which
that
doesn't mean that you have like access to ready cash, right? Like it's a whole different thing. Yeah.
I
Um,
don't leaving, I advise having a few bucks of cash in your purse.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I was looking the other day because I had some again, the tipping I got a new mattress and so they came and they brought my new one and took away my old one. I wanted to tip the guys and I had, like, nothing except for, I was like, I could give them goldfish. And I have, like, a 5-pound note somewhere, and I was like, "I gotta start getting some money." Um, but but again, like, just to go back to the how much money people are supposed to save, I'm actually curious if people in the chat have, like, thoughts about that number because another data point that I find, like, which, clearly undermines the first one, is that there've been numerous surveys, and these are kind of over the last 10, 20 years. 4 in 10 adults couldn't even cover $400 without borrowing or using a credit card, so 40%. And then another one has found that 47%, of Americans could cover a 100 oh, sorry, 1,000, not 100,000, $1,000 emergency expense, from savings. So the whole idea that you need to have 3 times your monthly salary when half the people can't, half the people out there can't muster $400, and again, usually by no fault of their own, but that's deeply contrasting, pieces of information, right? The financial services recommendations versus the idea that most people to pay for a $400 emergency would have to use a credit card.
and I quote that, statistics like that a lot in Untrickled because, when you're talking about quality, I find that people are really familiar with their own lives, and they don't realize that sometimes, like, even their coworkers,
Mhm.
um, a situation where maybe you're married and fairly secure, but your coworker that's,
Yeah.
uh and if they're making the same amount of you, if they're living on their own, they may not have as much money, and everybody kinda takes for granted that everybody's about where they are, but, they aren't, and the idea that you would be in real trouble if you had a $400 expense, like, I remember that. I am fortunately not quite at that level right this minute, but I spent many years like that, and you don't tend to forget it if you've had a few situations where you desperately need money and just plain do not have it. So,
Mhm. So what do you think? I mean, again, we've talked about this before. A lot of people's financial advice is really annoying or patronizing, right? Like the idea that you could budget yourself into sort of, plenitude and abundance. But so when people say just put aside $5 a month or $10 a month,
uh,
what do we think of that?
I think that that is really a cruel thing to say to somebody who does not have $5 to $10 a month, and I have been there, and I remember very well what it's like, and I remember someone saying that to me back in those days that I should just put $5 back. I'm like, where am I going to get this $5? It honestly took everything I had just to pay for the most basic level of, I had 2 young children. I did not have money. I just have it. Everything I had went into buying groceries and paying for utilities. And,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm extremely frugal. I am able to stretch a buck when I have to, which I
Yeah,
usually do.
I believe it.
Spending it on DoorDash or vacations or designer clothes or whatever. We're talking, you get paid, you pay all the bills that absolutely have to be paid, and then you take whatever's left, you go to the grocery store and you shop carefully. When you're at that level,
Yeah.
and maybe at the grocery store, you can't quite even get everything you need because you just are a little bit short, and you end up eating some kind of crap meals for a few days, like ramen noodles that isn't really compatible with human life. Those
Yeah.
should not regularly, but many people have to.
Right. It's a good cheap alternative, right? It's a good cheap option when you can get what do you get, like 5 for $1.50 or
Uh,
something at the grocery store?
Keep it oldie, but I mean, the thing is,
Yep.
there's nutrition, but if you're hungry, you don't really,
Yeah,
sometimes you be fed.
they're fine, right? Like, you use them every once in a while, you're fine. If you're feeling really generous, like, put an egg on top so you get some protein, and then, you're great.
I ate so many ramen noodles when I was in college. I'd never heard of a college and everybody's eating ramen noodles, and they do taste good and they are really cheap. But I mean, they're fine for once in a while, but you would
Yeah,
not want to
yeah,
rush your body.
right.
But
So, yeah, so to save 5 or save $10 here or there, it really is, like, assuming that you have a little bit of breathing room in your budget and you can actually put aside the $10 or the whatever it is.
here's the problem: it is profitable to give financial advice to the well off because they can pay you for your financial planning services, or they can buy your book, or they can subscribe, and pay for your Substack or what.
Right.
But there isn't anybody who is giving good advice to the poor from their own experience. Or, I mean, there probably is somebody out there. Well, I mean, I sort of qualify, but I'm not gonna. I hate to bring up Dave Ramsey, but some of his advice is fine, but some of it is really, really unrealistic. And I'm sorry, but I don't feel like taking advice from somebody who lives in a disgustingly decadent manner. Like, don't you check around in a
Yeah,
limousine, a mansion, telling me that I should, like, live on beans and rice, even though I very often do live on beans and rice. I don't wanna hear you say that to me. I'll
yeah.
tell people, "Have some beans and rice, here's a great recipe," because I actually eat that way. I don't wanna hear it from Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey can stick his beans and rice right up his ass, okay?
Yeah, I have no problem with that. So it's interesting. So yeah, I think it's the idea that just trying to find out for some people just trying to find the extra $5 or $10 is a lot. What's interesting is there have been some studies more recently about even people with pretty high incomes living month to month. And not having it's obviously not the same, and there's a lot more latitude in terms of like you actually could, but the whole idea that there's such consumption happening, I think there was the study that I saw was that even uh, half of people making something like between 350 and 500,000 were living basically month to month, which is
Really,
like a shocking statistic.
because the very first thing I did when my financial situation improved a little bit was start doing as much as I could of what is recommended, putting more money into an employer's 401k,
Mm-hmm.
put aside a little bit more money in my savings account. That's the first thing I did was like, let's get out of this vulnerable, scary situation where there's no buffer zone for anything that goes wrong. Because
Yep.
if they shit happens, we say that because shit always does happen.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
aren't prepared. It's
Like
such,
it's never an if, it's a when, right? It's just what form of shit and like what timing of shit. Yeah.
and like, let's say something happens, like your water heater goes out. Okay,
Right.
it's emergency, but no one likes taking cold baths and showers. You want to have hot water in your house. This isn't 1850. And when your water heater goes out, I can remember times when that was an "oh my god, what will we do" situation. And the last time we noticed, we knew it was going out. It was starting to leak a little bit.
Mhm.
We were able to we went to Menards, we bought one, we called our friend. There's your community again, our friend that's really comfortable with dealing with gas. and he came, and my husband and my friend put it in. My husband, by the way, is very suspicious of natural gas because in Europe they don't use it.
Yeah.
So he'll rewire the house, no problem. But when it comes to dealing with the gas line, he's he
He's
wants
like,
some.
"No, no, no, no."
But my friend is like, "Yeah, I'll come in and put your water heater in." And
Uh-huh.
when the friend needs something done that needs two people, we're over at that friend's house
Yeah,
lending a hand. That's how
yeah.
it works.
Yeah, which goes back to your point, right? One of the most important things you can do is actually just know people around you, and I do think of this because most of the time I try to hide from my neighbors. Um, like, if I hear one leaving the house next door, like, we have carports in the back, and if I hear one, I'll, like, wait for 5 minutes so I don't have to run into them, and I spend a lot of time trying to hide from them, but then I think about it sometimes when I'm, like, crouching, in my backyard trying to hide from my neighbors, I'm like, I should really get to know them because one day when when bad things happen, right, I would probably benefit from knowing them. One of mine is the dentist, so I do know him, but that's only tooth-wise.
See you carrying, something sugary into your house.
I know, right? Yeah, so I guess the only person I can go to in a time of true emergency is my dentist to the left over here. Yeah. But
Now,
it actually so it brings up a topic too of, I mean, the community that you can depend on for a lot of different things. All right, if your if your car won't start, or I mean, not emergencies, but small things. If you need something, you run out of something, you can go get it. But again, a ride to work, right? Help with the generator, help with all these kinds of things. Just somebody to check in and do a wellness check, right? As you said, if you have older neighbors, those are all really important. We haven't really talked about the various kinds of emergencies there are, and I think one of the interesting and important things to point out is that, not only are people with less money more likely to be without financial resources, maybe not community resources, but they're also more likely in a lot of cases to be subject to harm in the first place, right? To disasters and to emergencies, and they're actually, like, more likely to have harm. So, if
oh,
you think about, like, stuff about flood exposure or where affordable housing is built or sort of the climate change or where toxic waste is, people without a lot of money are actually more likely to be within geographies that are going to suffer harm.
so think about Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah, it's a great example, right?
Uh, there's a lot of poor people who live in Louisiana, obviously.
Mhm.
I remember reading somebody saying something like, when the news reports came out that this was gonna be bad, he said, "We loaded up our four-wheel drive vehicle and we drove right." Yeah, stayed at a hotel,
Yeah.
so well outside the flood zone. But
Mhm.
all the people who didn't have four-wheel drive SUVs and
Yeah.
money loaded up and gas to get themselves out of there, those were the people who were left behind, and some of those people, I mean, some of them literally died, and some
Mhm.
of them horrific experiences. And wouldn't it have been nice, well, logistically, it's hard get every of a city in short order, but it would have been nice if more people could have. And
Yeah.
then when you're dealing with the aftermath, if you've got a little bit of money, I mean, money won't help you if you're, like, sitting in the middle of a flood. I s
Mhm.
if you're on the verge of it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to be poor in the middle of a natural disaster is it just compounds the disaster.
Yeah.
So, uh,
And I mean, if you think about the way that disaster recovery works, people who are applying for, right, for like emergency aid, right, or if you have to go through FEMA or something like that, which I don't even know if it exists anymore.
uh,
I think Trump got mad at FEMA and but who knows?
a few
But if you have to go through a lot of administrative channels to get help, there's means testing, right? So and the paperwork that you have to do. It's much harder than if you just go to your bank or if you just dip into your emergency fund, right? Or you have left town in the first place. So it's a whole different. You're just disadvantaged on a number of fronts, right? From where you live in the first place to your ability to leave to your ability to actually get recovery money.
back in I wanna say this was 2012, but I'm not sure, but, it was when I was still working at the newspaper. There was
Hmm.
a day that had really weird weather. I'm like, "Wow, it's November, and yet it's like a spring day, but it seems kinda weird." And, then this major, F4 tornado hit. It hit
Yeah.
the town. live, and it hit Washington, Illinois. That was the some people might remember about this.
Yeah.
It hit Illinois and a little bit of East Peoria. I mean, it covered a vast area. And, someone I knew was home with her young child, about 4 or 5 years old at the time,
Uh-huh.
and out the front door, saw the tornado coming, grabbed her child, ran to the basement under the stairs, and that thing picked up her house. They had to be pulled
Oh,
from the
wow. Wow.
and the good thing about a tornado is sometimes you, like, walk 2 blocks away and all of a sudden everything's fine because they real sometimes they'll take off half your house and half of it's fine, not that you can live
Isn't
there.
that wow, that is so crazy. Yeah.
But, watching her experience, it's like, wow, she had luckily she owned her home and she had insurance, but
Yeah.
what about the renting and did not have insurance? They
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
and not only that, but this was before Trump came in and screwed up FEMA. FEMA existed back then, but nobody was eligible for the help they should have gotten because
Mhm.
base it upon your state's per capita
Yeah.
income. And even though Washington is a fairly, well-off community, but Central Illinois as a whole is not.
Uh-huh.
Eh, but Chicago, of course, makes if you look at the average or let's just say the average, not the median, income in Illinois, it looks really good because it includes Chicago. If
Right.
they go off and look at just Central Illinois, the story would be really, really, really so, a lot of, help that everybody thought we would get, we didn't get because a rich area is within our state's borders, and, like,
Right.
that's unfair, but that's how it is, and it's even worse now
Yeah.
because now, like, 3 people and a shoebox of Chuck E. Cheese tokens, I think. That's all that's left.
Hey. Oh, you should get a pizza. No, no toppings. But, I mean, it's a good point too about renters, right? So, I mean, the people who have less resources are more likely to be renters, and people who are renters, like rental housing where it's located. Also, if you're a renter, right, you don't actually have the power to sort of change the house, right? To like retrofit it or to make sure it's sort of like the house itself is prepared for disasters. So you're really at the mercy of the landlord. And we know that landlords, right, there's definitely better and worse landlords. And there's definitely a lot of rental properties that are definitely under cared for. And so just the fact of renting alone puts you in a difficult situation.
Let me jump in here and say, please try to get rental insurance if you
Yeah.
are
Yes.
reason I say this is for many years, I was a reporter. I have covered about 10 million house fires, and in
Hmm.
every fire I ever covered,
Yeah.
I, I can't recall ever going to one where it turned out the renter had renter's insurance. And
Yeah.
renters are surprisingly cheap. I mean, I don't have a quote on the top of my head, but
I can tell you what I again because I rented a lot in my life and I've always had rental insurance and it was very reasonable. It was something, it was like I don't even remember now, but it was nothing. I mean, it was like not anything like car insurance, right? It was much cheaper. It was a very, very reasonable. I was thinking like $100 a year or something like that.
it is cheap. And I know maybe $100 a year or something sounds bad to you, but imagine all of it. Most of us own more stuff than we think, even if we're thinking
Yeah,
like, oh, no, I mean, just imagine that you're gonna go out tomorrow and buy a new bed and a new table and chair, all your dishes and all your pots
yeah,
and pans, linens and towels.
yeah,
And, my sister many years ago had a house fire, and
yeah,
for months would realize I don't have toenail clippers or whatever crazy thing.
right,
There all these little things that you don't even think about that you own, and you have to, like, buy new toenail clippers,
yeah,
buy new whatever, things that you do
yeah,
not but you own that you built up over the years. Do yourself a favor if you're renting a house and get some insurance. It's just get the cheapest.
yeah.
Get
I mean, it's one of those things like insurance is always annoying to buy, right? Because like it's one of those things, and I mean, most people probably wouldn't have car insurance if they didn't have to, right? In order to But insurance is just built that way. It seems annoying to pay the $100 a year, but it is absolutely worth the $100 a year, in a way that we normalize for other kinds of insurance. Because renters insurance is usually optional, so people usually opt out of it, but it is definitely worth it's a minimal amount compared to other kinds of insurance.
I do have a rental property, and it's currently, lived in by my adult
Is
son,
that where
which is
your son is? Yeah.
a great deal for him, it's a great deal for me because,
Yeah.
tenants really suck. But he never destroys anything and, is a very thoughtful renter. But, um, if something were to happen to that house, I have insurance, you know, on the house,
Yeah.
and so would pay to have the house repaired or rebuilt or whatever might be necessary. It would not cover my son's stuff at all. I need to
Yeah.
make sure insurance. I actually haven't had that conversation with him for a while. But, that's the thing. People think that their landlord's insurance will cover. No, no, no. It covers the actual dwelling. It does not cover any of your stuff.
Yeah.
Especially if you actually I'm thinking of the people whose house fires I mostly covered, they were usually lower income people. But it some people that rent are not lower income, and
Right.
they make any number of very expensive items in their house. They may have really nice furniture, they may have jewelry, they
Yeah.
may have collections or art or something. Those people, I'm assuming, probably already are, taking care of their insurance, but, we have seen that having money does not always mean you make good
Right.
decisions.
Doesn't always mean make good choices, but I feel like one of the things that people with a lot of money at least do quite well is insure their belongings. So you insure your art collection or your wine collection or your cars or wherever you are. But rental insurance up and down and across the wealth spectrum is um a really great thing. So yeah, it's true because again, renters are in a more precarious position. It's nice in the way that for renters, like you said, if the water heater goes out, you're not responsible for it. If, all of these things happen, it's your landlord who's responsible. And again, it comes down to hopefully having a good landlord who will actually do the things that need to be done. So that in that sense, you save yourself the investment pieces of the house. But it's also more precarious in this sense. And so more likely to, yeah, be in harm's way.
Yeah. So, let's get back a little bit more into the money, I think, here I've got an option for some people. This well, it doesn't apply to everybody, but, it worked out really well for my son. I probably told this story before, but when my son was, much younger and, was had moved out of the house, but it was taking everything he made just to pay for rent and his car payment and his student loan payment and his normal other expenses. And at one point, one little straw broke the camel's back, and I told him, "Just move back home. Just move back home and save your money. Keep looking for a better job." So
Yeah.
he moved back home into his childhood bedroom. I treated him like an adult, not a child. He did not treat me like, his maid. I mean, I never allowed that, of course, but,
Right.
yeah, his own laundry. He pitched in on the dishes and,
Yeah.
uh, mowing the yard and things like that.
Right.
Uh, he didn't just play video games. I mean, he still worked. He paid for his own cell phone, his own car insurance, and all that type of thing.
Hmm.
But I counseled him, and so I said, "Look, you have to take all this extra money that you would be spending on rent and utilities, and let's be
Yeah.
honest, and laundromats or whatever, like, you're saving all this money, make, like, double, triple, quadruple payments on your loans," and that's what he did. He paid the student loans, he bought a new car, he bought like a
Uh-huh.
one Corolla. I mean, like, he researched it in Consumer
Yeah.
Report. He is my son for sure,
I was
and
gonna say, "He's your son," right? Of course he did. Yeah.
he did buy, like, a fun car, he bought the Corolla, and, he when he moved out, it was after he'd paid off everything he owed in the world, including student loans and car loan, and
Mhm.
had, built up an emergency fund of I don't remember, but, like, a pretty reasonable good one that
Yeah.
would cover I think he actually probably had what you recommend,
Yeah.
and then additional sum so that he could actually buy nice furniture, not just whatever, but actually go to a real furniture store and
Yeah.
buy and so when he moved out, it was a completely different story than when he moved in because
Yeah.
and like I said, very fortunately, the renters I had at that point moved out just when he was like, I don't know, I
Yeah.
think I can afford to move out. And they're like, "We're moving out." I'm like, "You want to move into your childhood home?" And it was, like I said, a fantastic deal for
Yeah.
both. And he's been there ever since. It's like,
Yeah.
he's got nice furniture. He's got money in the bank.
Right. Yeah. This is interesting though, because this is a point where across the wealth spectrum, it works the same way, but it gets judged differently, I feel like, because I mean, there's a lot of talk out there, right, about basically like, bank of mom and dad, right? Or bank of parents and parents. supporting their adult children because it's such a phenomenon these days because it's so expensive to live. But it just shows you, right? I mean, I think it's something that high wealth families have done forever, support their children, right?
Now,
You help them buy businesses, you help them buy cars, you help them buy houses, you send them to law school, you send them to medical school, you you know, give them seed funding for whatever they want. And it works the same way in every family, right? Parents help you and if they can, and it's a way, like you just said, like your example is a great example, a way to get people started, like young adults started, and to help them save up to get furniture or to pay off loans or to do what they need to do.
there are families, and I come from, you know, the type of working class community where this was a common value. There's families that believe that, like, once you're 18, you're on your own.
Right.
Hit the door and get a job. And I grew up hearing that from a lot of different people in my community,
Uh-huh.
and realized it enough that I didn't ever want to take any money from my parents. And then I found out, like, so many other people I knew were getting, like, down payments and paid for, like, you know, all this money. Like, wow, really? Really? That was kind of a revelation to me because I had not grown up in an environment where that was considered the thing to do. That was considered like stand on your own 2 feet. But
Mhm.
honestly, my son, you know, barring some catastrophe, he can stand on his own 2 feet way better because I gave him a good
Right.
foundation.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm a big fan of that. And, I've helped my daughter. She's fortunately in a much, much better place than she was when she was a divorced single mom for a while. Now she got a much better house. She's got a much better partner. She's just in everything is good in my kid's life.
Traded up all the way.
It's such a good feeling. But there was
That's
a time
great.
I could help her, and I'm glad that I had figured out by then that like that like message you grew up with in your original community that it should be totally dependent from a young age is not a useful way to live in the modern world because it
Yeah.
takes a lot to set up an adult life now.
It
And
really does, and I think the whole idea that you would turn 18 and all of a sudden or whatever age it is and be just be ready to do that is, it's a lot to put on a kid, or an adult kid. It's somewhere in between, right? You're somewhere in between at 18. A young adult, I guess. It's a lot to put on a young adult, and people again have assumed for years that their families would help them in sort of high wealth families, and I don't see why that doesn't apply across the board in terms of. I mean, family is generally right your biggest safety net if you're talking about what to do in an emergency. I mean, I was thinking what I would do in an emergency if I didn't have a job for like a couple of years. And I mean, I would absolutely 100% like go to my mother. My mom, like here I'd be. Um, I would go to my family, right? Because like that's where you can hopefully find some kind of support. And like your son found great support from you.
that's the original basis of your community. And
Right.
people who don't have that because either their family is just dysfunctional or very poor
Right.
or way, that you're way more vulnerable if you don't have that family. Like my son and I have discussed this many times. If I'd been gone, I'm sure his dad would have helped him in some way. But if he wasn't around either, and my son was on his own, he might have ended up. I hate to say it, but maybe he might have ended up homeless at a certain point because things had just really built up. And when the one thing broke, the one straw I mentioned that broke the camel's back,
Mhm.
it's really nice that I could say move home.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
he's doing
Absolutely.
any of us
Yep.
now. He had that good foundation and he took advantage of it. And like I said, people that are always afraid that your adult kid is just going to sponge off you and not pitch in. Like, well, hopefully you raised them not to do that, and that they
Right.
know act like an adult member of the household, not like, hey, mom, I'm out of shirts. Are you going to do
Right.
laundry? Not fly with me.
Right.
So
Yeah. And it's interesting because again, like even just in financial terms, the family unit, right? I mean, it's often been a place where people have gone, especially I think in like lower income families, because often it's hard for the adult kids, especially when they're just starting out, to get any type of loan, right? You can't get money from a bank. And so you go to your parents for a little bit of help or somebody in your family, and I use parents, but also any type of like chosen family that you have. So you go there because you can't go to the bank. and say, like, "I just like some money," right? You have nothing to give them in terms of collateral, and they're not gonna give you a loan. Um, a lot of people don't even want a bank account at that point, right? Because they don't want the fees and they don't want sort of unexpected fines and things like that. And I think the same thing, right? If you have a lot of money, you go to your family for lending often because you don't want to go through sort of official processes, and you go to your family and maybe your family office, or you go to your trustee and you ask for money. So it's up and down, again, up and down sort of the money levels, right? It's sort of a family-based
I
emergency fund.
I get the impression that families that do have generational wealth are very comfortable with, handing money down so that kids can start businesses or pay for education, buy their first house or whatever, but,
Yep.
I think as you go down, there is more of an assumption that people should be able to do it all by themselves. But
Mhm.
again, I don't think that's even I think it's less true than it's ever been because it takes so much more money to get started now. I mean,
Yep.
you hear people who a couple of generations ago start off with nothing.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to start with nothing and build yourself up now
Yeah.
because
You can, yeah.
the entry level is so much higher.
I think that's the thing too. I mean, it's just a different economy, obviously, and we've talked about this, and it's not the same as it was in 1954, right? To go out and buy a house and find a job and, right, start that sort of whatever we call adult life, that, all of those material indicators of what we think of as an adult life. It's just not the same for somebody now.
I bought my first house at age 24, which if you only hear that statement, you think, "Wow, you must have been rich," because but things were very different. This was 1990, and
Uh-huh.
so it was very, very different in 1990. Um, I had, my first child was about, 8 months old, and we wanted to, move, and we bought a house. This house, you're gonna think I'm 110 years old. It cost 37.5, and you know what? We barely made the payments. It
Yeah.
was all we could do to make those payments. But, for all the people that say that, "Don't buy a house until you put down a big, down payment," my house
Mhm.
was right around $400, which was the same amount that our rent was before we moved,
Yeah.
and, uh, believe it or not, our, interest rate was 9.5%, which
Huh.
sounds really bad, and it is bad, but back then, that was actually considered pretty normal, and I
Mhm.
can her when a friend of mine excitedly told me that she had refinanced her house because it had hit 6%, and her husband said, "It can't go much lower." And now people
That's funny.
I
Yeah.
remember I was jealous of her 6% because I knew that, like, so much of my money was going
Yeah.
into
Interest, yeah.
but
Yeah.
by being able to buy young like that, even though it was a very cheap house, that really is the foundation for, again, I am not a wealthy person, but a lot of the reason why, I am as doing as well as I am is because that first house really made a huge difference.
Uh-huh.
For a little bit more money and move up to a little
Yeah.
bit better. That's how you get a little bit
Yeah.
better life.
So you actually kind of did follow, right, some of the, like, conventional financial planning advice in terms of buying a home and making it right, putting an investment in there and actually getting a return from that. So that's, another piece of advice that financial planners give all the time, in addition to the one we started with, the 3 months of salary.
Well, you can still go we went through FHA, which only makes you put down about 3%, and
Yeah.
those loans are still available. You can still do that, and if you're a veteran, there's I think an even better deal available through the VA. I'm not wasn't for that, but FHA, to put down only 3%, yes, you're gonna be paying an awful lot of mortgage insurance, and the private mortgage insurance is a horrible ripoff that they're gonna force you to pay, and I don't know any way around that if you go but, but it does allow you to get your foot in the door and buy something, so, I mean, that really worked for me. It may not be for everybody, but buying a house through FHA with 3% down, yes, you're gonna spend a lot on interest, but also it gets your foot in the door and you start
Right.
building and that made a huge difference in my life. I recommend people look into it.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting, right? Because I think, right, that was something that was very successful. And it's another thing people say for houses, put a little bit aside, because I think for most people, one of the biggest obstacles is the down payment.
Mhm.
And so people say put a little bit aside the same way they say put a little bit aside for your emergency funding. Um, so if you were to tell somebody, put $10 or put $100 aside a month or a week or whatever it is, should then they say, well, should I put it aside for a house? Should I, what should be my priorities be? And I think this is the problem that emergency funds always end up to be the very last one. Should I put it in a retirement account? Should I put it toward buying a house? Should I put it toward, right, paying off my loans, right? It's like people have so many things that come above the emergency fund and funding that it is, and they are good questions, right? Should I put money into my retirement account? Because we've talked about retirement accounts before, and people are, I mean, as a nation, people's accounts are woefully underfunded. Or should they buy a house? Which I mean, you just showed a good example of how it can help people build wealth. So I think people don't, they want to do the other things first, and the last place people want to want to put money is in a high yield savings account because it's not getting them anything, right? Like the retirement savings or the house.
When I bought that house at age 24, we didn't have any emergency savings. We 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 bought the house with no emergency savings. Like I said, the rent cost about the same amount as the house. Um, Differences, of course, the furnace went out that first winter, and that was a really big expense. And we ended up having to use a really horrible loan of 24%, which
Mhm.
really, if we'd had an emergency
Yeah.
account, we do that, but we didn't, so we did. And every month though, I would sit there with a ballpoint pen and a loose leaf notebook and
Uh-huh.
write all of our income and everything we had. And if I was able to pay it, like even $2 more on that stupid furnace loan,
Yeah.
it I was paying an awful lot of money into interest at those
Right.
years. But I was super careful, and I really hate paying interest for anything, but I could not avoid it at that point.
Right.
And it really, I can't even believe we got away with it. But the thing is, it's easier to get away with it when you're young. You're less likely to have like major health problems or things like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
So we got away with it. It was risky, but honestly, everything was risky at that point in life.
So that's one more thing I wanted to bring up what you were talking about the high interest because one of the ways that people deal with emergencies in a lot of different circumstances is payday lending or different forms of really high interest lending and payday lenders are making exorbitant amounts of profit and extracting all kinds of money from people by charging 60, 70, 100, sometimes 600% interest and then late fees and things like that. So I think one of the worst forms of emergency planning for people without a lot of resources is that payday loan, right? And sometimes it's the last resort. And like you said, sometimes maybe it's the only resort, but that is one of the most, at least in terms of people building wealth, that's the most harmful because it actively strips people of the opportunity to not even build wealth, but even just sort of keep themselves afloat.
A lot of people end up having to roll those loans over again and again. Does it
The
completely?
average time is they're rolled over is 8 times.
I can't even imagine how desperate people must be to use. I mean, I've known people that have gotten entrapped by that.
Yeah,
The
easy to do, I think.
one I knew, she told me that her payday loan. This was a very poor single mom. Her payday loan was due, and if she didn't pay it. It was going to be this horrific amount. And would I just please give her, I don't know, $300 or something like
Yeah,
that? Promised me she'd pay me back, and she did. I gave her the money. She paid off her payday loan, and she did when she got her next money from whatever. He did pay me back,
yeah,
and might not have. I took a risk there, but again, community matters,
it does.
and
I mean, she paid you back. Did you charge her interest?
I did not charge her any interest.
You did not charge her interest. So I think the statistics are that on a $300 loan, most people end up paying somewhere between $900 and $1,200 worth of interest. And they an average number of 8 repeats, right? Like 8 renewals of the loan. I mean, that's where they make the big money is the renewals. I mean, you think they would make enough just on the one, but people keep renewing and then it just gets harder and harder because then you have all the interest due. And so if somebody like you can give that person $300 and sort of break the cycle, it really makes a difference. So I just wanted to put that out there because I think that is the and with no judgment, I think it's the worst form of emergency planning, and I hate that people have to use it, and I also hate that it's not regulated more, and that these companies are allowed to um, yeah, $300 loan, I was looking in the comments. Yeah, it's I mean, the loan some of the loan interest rates are like 600%. It's absolutely crazy, and the fact that we don't regulate it more is
We should have laws that
crazy,
regulate these businesses. This you know, in traditional religion, usury was like a really, serious sin. Uh, why have, the religious people not denounced this? Because this is, like,
right?
really this is
Because
terrible.
they're all making money. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
again, bucks could have ruined that girl's life.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's funny, I mean, all the payday lending, the interest, like, lobby groups for, basically fringe and alternative financial services, they all talk about it the way that you would expect them to, right? It's freedom, and don't be paternalistic, and people should have the choice to do this, and it's not really a choice though, right? When you have an emergency because you live in a flood zone and you rented and you didn't choose to have, right? You weren't free to live wherever you wanted. Anyway, a lot of false statements, right, about what's being freely chosen and what's not. But that is one form of emergency preparedness that I wish that people didn't have to use, and I wish that it was highly regulated.
I wish that girl had come to me in the first place and
Yeah,
said, "Here is my situation. Is there any way you can help?" Because, um, the payday loan places are just to avoid them at all costs. I mean, I would go and make money by donating my plasma. You can actually make a fair amount of money donating your plasma. I know because I did it at some desperate times in my life. Rather than going for payday loan, unless you're medically unable, go sell your plasma and get, you can make like $750 the first month because,
yeah,
uh, drops off after that. But if you're having some sort of one of those $400 emergencies and you
yeah,
honestly just have it,
yeah.
everybody go sell your plasma. That's better than going to a payday loan place. That is my terrible financial advice for the day that might
Right.
actually.
Yeah, I had a friend in, graduate school who, basically, like, did sperm banking and made a ton of money. And, yeah, so there are all kinds of things to do, absolutely, to make some money. Okay, so we're almost at time, so just, I thought we could wrap up by, what is your emergency plan for the apocalypse? We all know mine is now goldfish and protein bars, and to be clear, I do have the cat carriers in some place that's accessible, so I'll be, like, in my car with my cats with my, like, stash of goldfish. How about
Yeah,
you?
those little fire safe, I don't know how fire safe they really are. Those little fire safe boxes. I've got one of those. I've had it for like most of my life. I actually gave one to my son when he moved down. In that thing, I have things like, basic financial documents, birth certificates,
Yeah,
any sort of paperwork like that, and, I'll say it's not enough to come rob me, but I've got a little bit of cash in there, cash money, cash, just in case there's something coming up, like, as it sometimes does. It is not a fortune, do not come try to steal it,
don't come for me.
but, in case of some really crazy emergency, I have all that stuff, my passport,
Oh,
all
yeah,
that
get the passport, yeah, ready.
little bit of money, and if some sort of a major catastrophe that made me have to flee immediately, that's one of the things I would grab
Yeah.
because you're gonna need your documents in an
I have my
after.
cat's passports too at the ready.
Yeah,
Somebody said live goldfish or the crackers. Definitely the crackers. I mentioned earlier I have like a kind of a case of the pizza flavored ones. It's true the cats would prefer the live ones, agreed. But I have the pizza flavored ones. So I'm gonna have the cats, I'm gonna have the goldfish, the pizza flavored goldfish, all of our passports, and the protein bars. I should be in great shape. And the 5 pound note that I have somewhere.
and, if it's not a flee situation, if it's a stay in place situation, shelter in place situation, I always have my pantry well stocked,
Yeah,
and not be the type of food that you would love eating. Cold beans eaten out of a can may not be very exciting, but it beats going hungry.
yeah,
And live in a place where, you can see I've got a yard. It
yeah,
on the weather, I could either for the first day or 2, I could grill, and then after that, I've got a little fire pit, and I've got some wood. In the worst case scenario, I could, carry my I've published a recipe. I have actually made stew outside in my cast iron pot
There you
over
go, yeah,
fire. I did that for fun, but in an emergency situation, I
yeah,
think I'll come to my house and have, my bean stew or
right,
whatever that I in my, backyard.
yeah. Yeah, I have a
And
big pantry, and I feel like if things really got bad, I could probably eat the cat food because they have really delicious looking cat food. They have, like, bouillabaisse and, like, turkey stew and, like, Mediterranean fish stew, and they always sound so good. They're like little bistro dinners, so I figure, like, at the end of the day, like, I could just go for that.
or you could buy some, like, canned soup or something.
I do, I mean, I have that. I'm just thinking, like, in the worst case scenario, if I ran out of, like I have a lot of stuff in my I have a very full pantry, in addition to the protein bars and the goldfish, I've got, like, canned soup, I got canned beans, I've got, like, all kinds of stuff, but if worse came to worse, I could eat the cat bouillabaisse.
If worst came to worst, I'm aware of a lot of, weeds that grow, just they're just like
There yeah,
you can't eat that are actually quite nutritious.
yeah.
And I'm not that far from the Illinois River. I could probably figure out how to I don't really have fish, but in a worst case scenario, I'm sure I could figure out how to catch a fish and, weeds. If you wanna get
I've
to
watched Naked and Afraid a lot, and so I know how to catch a fish in a in a in a radically extreme climate. I know how to do all the things that they do on Naked and Afraid.
I'd never seen the show. I actually thought it was a joke when I first read about it, but apparently it
I
really
know, right? No, no, it's true, and I mean, you don't do anything, they don't have challenges like on Survivor, they literally just have to survive for 28 days or 14 days or whatever it is. So you just watch them, like, trying to catch fish for the whole time. It's not all that exciting, but they are naked and afraid. So,
I'll probably prioritize wearing clothes in any
yeah.
apocalypse.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. All right, well, thanks everybody for being with us and talking about emergency preparedness. Once we, post a video if you have any of your own emergency preparedness, either tips or what you've got. If you've got, your goldfish version of goldfish and cat passports, let us know.
Yeah, thank you everybody for showing up, and, if you've got a suggestion for, a really great emergency preparedness tip,
Yeah.
uh, comments after this posts.
Yeah. All right. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Bye.
Enjoy your backyard.
I will.